I think the key is breaking it down as to what AI does and what it doesn't do. I think
Mhm.
that's really, really important as a overarching goal. And then, believe it or not, the second thing is it's not about the technology. The technology is fancy and impressive, but at the end of the day, getting back to where we started, this is about people. This is about
Right.
change management. This is about disrupting the workflows that we have and introducing this technology into those workflows. I think what we have to do is recognize our collective subject matter expertise. Nurses, clinicians, front desk staff, they know their domain. They know what they need to do. There could be some companies out there that say this is the solution and we've done a lot of research on it. But have you asked the people and have you included the people that are doing those very workflows every day, and do they have a say in it? I think that's critically important for both sides to think about as we go. What I am looking forward to is the computer vision that is coming, right? So not only do we have voice, but now we're going to have the ability to track video. Right now, we're still using AI predominantly. We're typing, we're texting, it's listening. We're getting, audio cues back from it. I think video and vision is the next big thing.
Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back to Scaling Practice Management, the show where we help practice managers grow smarter, not harder. My name is Jakub Grajcar. I'm the head of marketing at Talkie AI, where we help medical practices stop the phone from ringing off the hook and unburden their front desk team with AI medical receptionist agents. And we're already helping 300,000 patients every month with that. My guest today is Stephen Ferrara. Stephen, how are you feeling today?
I am great, Jakob. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, honestly great. I've been looking forward to recording this episode. I'm always so happy to record these episodes. So this is the cherry on top for my day. Thanks for asking. So now, a couple words about Stephen for the watchers and listeners as context. Stephen has been a nurse practitioner for 26 years, led the American Association of Nurse Practitioners as its president, and ran the AI office at Columbia School of Nursing. He now runs AI Nurse Academy, and we'll put the link to that in the show notes, of course, teaching the world's largest healthcare workforce how to actually use this technology. If you're a practice leader trying to figure out where AI fits, this episode is definitely going to be one for you. Stephen, what's a fun fact about you that I didn't include in this little bio there?
Fun fact is I play street hockey every Sunday. I'm a goalie, and we play in a closed court. And I enjoy my time running around, or actually being a goalie for street hockey. So that's a fun fact.
Street hockey going. How did you get into that?
Well, I never learned to ice skate, but I loved to play hockey. In the neighborhood, and as I've gotten older, I found a bunch of similarly aged people who still like to play, and I really, really enjoy it.
Okay. Is it just I want to stay there for a second. Is it just for fun or is it competitive? Is there like a street hockey league?
It's just for fun. I mean, I've played in leagues before, but this is just for fun. Just a bunch of us running on Sunday mornings and just enjoying some time outside and playing the sport that we love.
Yeah, yeah, that's honestly amazing. I can definitely relate to that. Something I never thought I would be able to say about myself is like I got really into a sport recently, specifically the climbing gym. One of my friends got into it. He's been messaging me for months, right? And I was never, I was always the guy to kind of avoid PE lessons when I was at school, never sporty, right? But there's something about the climbing gym, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think
And
I
this,
think we're
I
just
mean, it's a way
yeah.
that we can move and move our bodies, and it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, I think we're just conditioned for that, like,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we've evolved from the apes, right? So I
it's
guess we
true.
just love to climb. We just love to climb. That's something that's been on my mind recently. Cool, cool. Thank you so much for that fun fact. Typically at this point we would also play the warm-up game. Let's try and get a little bit more out of you before we launch into the conversation proper. So the warm-up game consists of two stages. First, please pick three numbers 1 to 10.
Do you want me to tell you what they are?
Yeah, yeah, please pick them.
5, 7, and 10.
5, 7, and 10. Okay, so the categories you picked, and then you're gonna pick a category, and I'm gonna ask you a question. The categories are pets, talent, and somebody finally picked 10, which is movie. Which category do you want?
Let's do hats.
It was pets, actually.
Oh, pets. I'm sorry. I thought you said hats. I don't have any pets. So, what was the second one?
The second one was talent, and the last one was movie.
Let's do talent.
Talent, okay. So other than street hockey, what's something you're surprisingly good at that has nothing to do with work?
Well, I guess surprisingly good at is debatable. But I have been known to pick up a karaoke mic and perform in a way that gets the whole crowd going. So I have been karaoke. I've been bitten by the karaoke bug and really enjoy being able to. I do not claim to be a great singer, but I enjoy it, and I'm gonna list that as a talent.
Okay, amazing. What's your go-to song then?
All right, that's a good. I have a couple. Ice
Okay.
Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice, is one. This is how we do it by Montel Jordan. So I have a few in my pocket. Depends on what the mood is at the particular venue. But yeah, I like to get the party going.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I can picture it. I can picture it. It's such a fun,
There
fun
there may
mental
be
image.
video
Yeah.
circulating around at a particular event, but it's all good, all good fun.
Okay, we'll of course link to that in the show notes
I'll have to see
if we
get that
find it.
scrubbed. You have to scrub that. Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta go. I need to delete some videos. I gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Big karaoke fan as well. I think my go-to I have a couple Polish go-tos, but one in
Okay.
English that I sing. Well, me and my friends, we love to sing like Living on a Prayer.
Oh yeah.
Just yeah, just belch our hearts out.
Just
That's
wailing that song. Absolutely love it.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Or maybe like Africa by Toto, but those are the group ones. Individually, I think I sang like Creep once or twice by
Okay.
Radiohead, but that's me self-reporting on
That's
myself.
that's
Anyway, let's
a hard song to sing. So we'll have to see if there's any video of you out there.
now I need to go scrub some videos from YouTube. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering that question. We're more than warmed up and ready to get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation. So, the
Awesome.
second tradition of the show, other than the warm-up game, is of course the number one tip question. So, Steven, you're gonna get it now. What is your number one tip for successfully growing a healthcare practice? Let's switch gears to that.
The number one tip I have is remember we are there to serve the patients that we need to see. And that is going to be the most important thing, I think, going forward. There's so many tasks, there's so many things that we always need to consider in a healthcare practice. But really, at the end of the day, why are we there? Right? We're there to serve the patients, the community that we are in, and I try to keep that first and foremost every time. I speak to, practice owners and other nurse practitioners and physicians. It's easy to forget that. And recently I had the opportunity, my mom was sick and I had to be on the patient side. And let me tell you, there's a lot of frustrations as a healthcare person trying to navigate the system that I know well. There's a lot of broken parts of it. So please remember the patient, please remember their family, and try to put them at the center of the universe.
Yeah. Why do you think it's easy to forget that? Like, what's creating that kind of environment where perhaps there isn't enough focus on the patient?
I think it's task overload, right? There's so many things that we have to do to run a practice successfully, right? We have to make sure that, there's people there to greet patients and there's billing and there's all the things that go into running a successful practice. Sometimes it's easy to forget why we are there, and it becomes more performing tasks than really providing care, right? And providing the access to care that people need in order to either, promote their health or to recover from an illness or injury. So, got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great tip, and one that it bears repeating, right? Between the various conversations we've had on this show, I agree. It's easy to forget when you see patients day in and day out, when you work long hours, to remember that there's this human on the other side. And it's funny. It reminds me of the most random thing. Of I don't know if you've ever used the Reddit platform. There's a bunch of forums there, right? And a lot of the subreddits have this as the number one rule in how to use that forum is remember the human, right? Especially online, of course. You need to remember there's a human on the other side, but even in the doctor's room, right? You also need to remember that.
That's right.
We'll have that on file as your number one tip, and thank you so much for sharing that. There's a
Sure.
ton of other things we want to get into today, so let's keep moving on. First of all, though, I wanted you to share a little bit more of your background with the audience. So you've been a nurse practitioner for 26 years. You led the American Association of Nurse Practitioners. You were at Columbia. You run AI there. Now there's AI Nurse Academy. So, of all the different directions you could have picked, why did teaching nurses about AI become the thing? So, like, walk me through the moment of when you decided that's what you want to apply yourself to.
Yeah, and I wish I could say I was much more intentional in my
Okay.
career trajectory, but, I've always had this background, passion about technology, right? Whether that be personal use or professional, and I am that person in my family that people will call and say, "What should I buy if I wanna get, X, Y, or Z?" So, I've always had that self-taught and I've enjoyed that. As I've progressed in my career, nurse practitioner, I love taking care of patients. I love being able to work with them on their goals to attain a level of health that they're satisfied with. But I wanted to do quote unquote more, right? So I became involved with my professional NP association, AANP, and served on the board in various positions. And ultimately, I either had to run for president or step off the board because my time was done. So I figured, why not, right? So I did run for president and was happy to be able to serve in that position. And I just ended my 4-year commitment with AANP. So it was a great experience. I got to go to the White House. I've got to go speak
Wow.
to nurse practitioners across the U.S. and even internationally. I was able to make it to Scotland for a conference, so it was a great experience. As I saw the AI becoming more and more prevalent, this happened while I was at Columbia. They decided that they needed a point person to lead their AI efforts out of our school. So I had volunteered to help find that person to be the point person. And little did I know that it would be me. I was chosen to be that person, or more correctly, I was told to be that person.
Right.
So I said, okay, I'm gonna dig into this, and learned everything that I could about AI and healthcare. And what I came away with was a lot of more questions than when I started. Right. And I said,
Mm.
this is great. This AI stuff sounds like it could provide better care, make me a better clinician. But I haven't seen anything that's talking to me as a nurse or as a nurse practitioner. So at that point, I said, I am going to create a literacy platform for nurses to understand and to answer the questions that I had when I was starting out this process. And that's how AI Nurse Academy was really born. So right now I have one course on there. It's like a 101 course, and it really is the basics. And what I think is the essentials of what anybody in healthcare needs to
Mm.
know about AI, because as you know, we're increasingly seeing more and more tools and more uses of AI in clinical spaces.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, we're one of them here at Talkie with our AI
Absolutely.
receptionist, so that
Absolutely.
definitely connects. I have a couple questions about what you just said. First of all, so like the through line seems to be that you're really passionate about technology and teaching people about technology. So I just wanted to ask a general question about that. What do you think is the key to teaching people about technology? Taking them from I have no idea what, for example, AI is about to okay, I can understand how it works, the pros and cons. What's the key to that?
So I think the key is breaking it down as to what AI does and what it doesn't do. I think that's really, really important as a like a overarching goal. And then, believe it or not, the second thing is it's not about the technology. The technology is fancy and impressive, but at the end of the day, getting back to where we started, this is about people. This is about
Right.
change management. This is about disrupting the workflows that we have, and introducing this technology into those workflows. That's the key. So it can't always be about the technology. It has to be the underlying understanding of it, and then it's how do we successfully incorporate it into our workflow.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely dig a little bit more into that in just a second. Second
Sure.
thing that stood out to me though is that you were, in significant positions like president of the AANP, right? You were at Columbia, but now you're kind of striking out on your own, right? I wonder what that's been like for you. Your own brand, something that you're building that's entirely your own. What's that been like?
It's scary, but it's
Of course.
also quite empowering, and, what I love is I could really go in any direction I want, and either to success or to my peril, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's exciting, to be able to try and build something that's gonna make a difference in ultimately patients' lives because I always consider myself, even though I'm not actively practicing as a nurse practitioner today, I still consider myself clinician first. And
Hmm.
how can I make sure that a clinician who's interacting with a patient or a staff member interacting with a patient is going to provide that best experience possible and have that patient walk away from that encounter feeling empowered, feeling that they had all of their questions answered, and being able to have the tools that they need to achieve those goals in their health. So that's really the driving force, and that's why I'm excited about AI Nurse Academy.
Yeah, and I think that's a common thread between a lot of people like you is this sense of mission. That the mission is so important and feels you're so drawn to it that if you have to, build up your own brand, start from scratch, then you're gonna do it just to achieve that mission. I love it, and that's part of why we're talking today. So that's great. Let's dig into AI then. You mentioned you're passionate about educating about it, so let's educate. First of all, let's talk about the stakes here. So you've said that nurses are the world's largest healthcare workforce, but AI literacy hasn't caught up. We all know that. So for a practice manager, for somebody in that space listening right now, what does not being literate about AI actually cost them day to day? What are they missing out on? Let's start there.
I think first and foremost is the thought that you can use AI for anything and everything, right?
Uh-huh.
We can't have that mindset. And we know all AIs are not created equal. There's a famous saying, and I mess it up all the time, but I'm going to try and do it justice. Like, when all you have is a hammer, right? You see the world as all nails, right? And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't always use the same tool for every situation that is possible because we know the world is not made up of nails only, right? So I think it's understanding the right use case for AI is important as we utilize the technology. And I will always advocate for what we call maintaining the human in the loop. So
Mhm.
that means before any patient clinical decision is made on a patient, there was a human clinician that actually verified that decision before they said, "Okay, we're going to go ahead with this plan." I may make some tweaks to it. I may alter it a little bit, but I will be that final gatekeeper between AI and my real patient.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. But, looking at it through the lens of what people might be missing out on, I absolutely agree. There's a lot of AI hammers out there looking for, nails that aren't there, right? However, it seems like in the life of a practice, definitely in our case, in the front desk, there is a bunch of nails that AI could hammer down, just to draw out the metaphor. So what do you think those nails are? What are the aspects of running a practice where AI could actually have a significant difference, could make a difference?
Yeah, I think there's a huge administrative case
Mm,
to be made for AI and improving those very workflows that I mentioned earlier. You have to get patients in the door.
right.
That's or collect, or virtual door, whether that be a physical practice or a telehealth practice. And we still very much use a telephone. And there's online portals, of course, but how can we ease that process? And how can we reasonably set expectations for patients that we can get them in the door, a collective door, not with a 6-month wait. Which that's another critical issue is access, and it's matching available resources with what you have. If you have availability, you want to be able to get patients in the door, get them seen, get their health needs addressed. So I think when it comes to getting patients in, scheduling, verifying insurances and all the things that happen behind the scenes, I think there's an automation case to be made for AI to help with those processes.
Yeah, definitely. We're in that space. A story to share that happened to me just this week is I had a doctor's visit scheduled, and the receptionist, human receptionist, called me, and I had a taste of like what this is like, what the status quo is right now, and I was surprised.
Mm,
She sounded really tired, probably overworked, and also she had this really, really significant cough, right? Which I'm not sure if this is like an ongoing condition or if she was just not feeling well at work, but it was a little bit frustrating when, there was more coughing than speaking on her end. I felt for her and I really thought, of course I have a huge bias because I'm a talkie, right? But
right,
she would probably be happy for those because this was basically an appointment confirmation conversation for those
right.
conversations to be taken over by AI to make things simpler, right? So that really reinforced my sense of mission in there. And of course, thank you for mentioning that. I think there's a big administrative case here. But aside from, what I would love to hear and what's music to my ears in terms of the front desk, where else do you think AI being, an opportunity rather than a risk for practice managers?
Yeah, I think that from a marketing perspective, I think there's,
Mm,
again, if patients can't find us, they can't use us as their destination for health. So I think you can, there's a marketing case for AI to be made. So I would venture to say that there's probably no administrative task that couldn't be automated with the assistance of AI in those spaces. Scheduling, right? Like
mm,
scheduling, I've had roles in my career where I've had to schedule clinicians for shifts and talk about, it's a full-time job. But
yeah.
it's not really a full-time job. You don't get paid just to be a scheduler. It's one of the many tasks that you have. So I think there's certainly a huge case for tracking schedules and time off and all the things that we need to keep track of. Credentialing,
Mm,
making sure that the providers are up to date with their CPR, with their various licenses. AI can certainly help us in those areas, and that's just the front end, right? That's just front end. This is even before we get to the clinical pieces. And if you want me to dive in a little bit on the clinical, I'm happy to go there.
yeah. And just to add on top of that, I think, well, first of all, if you're dealing with text in any capacity, there AI should be something that you should consider for those things. Like you mentioned, marketing, you sending emails, running your social media. When you're talking about a medical team, when the same person might be manning or handling the front desk and running the social media, like if their social media part of the task becomes easier, that is also a little bit more time freed up to speak with patients, to have a little bit more time for them. So I think every little bit counts. And in terms of literacy, what comes to mind is I don't know if people are aware, but even right now in Gmail, for example, right? If you've got a Google account that you're using at your practice, those suggested email responses, that's AI as well, and it's not as scary and as as potentially off-putting as like a full voice agent or something like that. So I think there's I mean, not that our voice agents are off-putting, ours are great. But I'm just looking at the perception of it. And I think that leads me to my next question is this kind of core understanding of AI, right? Because I think depending on, like you mentioned, the level of literacy, right? Um, I think people might be seeing AI as such an alien technology, that these are almost like digital people. So could we demystify that a little bit for them? Okay, we talk about AI agents, we give them a persona, but what's actually happening underneath? What are some of the underlying mechanisms there?
Yeah, and this is the core of my 101 course is,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, these models are probability machines, right? So they are predicting with lots and lots of calculations that's happening behind the scenes as to what prediction of the next token
Mhm.
is what I will say, we think of words, but really what's happening behind the scenes is this is broken down into tokens. So you may hear the word token in AI and say, I don't know what a token is, but it's simply the word, the
Mhm.
output that either you're inputting or you're getting in the output. So there's probability that's going on. What is the most likely phrase or word to come next based on the training data that the models were trained on? These are not encyclopedias. This is not a repository of information. These models were fed lots and lots of it's even hard to put our mind around how much data these models have consumed. And for many instances in generative AI cases, the models learn and how to predict what should come next. There's other things to consider, and I don't go deep into them, but things like the term temperature, right?
Mhm.
This idea of temperature, it's a setting. It's a setting that the developers can set. The lower the temperature, the more likely the response is going to be based on its training. The higher the temperature, there's gonna be some nuance, there's gonna be some, creativity in the type
Right.
of response, and I would say when we're talking about healthcare and the healthcare setting, we would want a low temperature, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Creativity is nice, but we don't need to be creative when we're talking about, a patient scheduling an appointment or, us telling them that they have a certain diagnosis. We want to make sure that that is, very accurate and not based on some different algorithm. The other thing that I mentioned is weights. So there's
Mhm.
this concept of weights, and the more frequently a word or phrase appears in the training data, the more likely that's going to be weighted heavily, and that's going to show more in the AI response. So, that's where bias is introduced, that if your training data has some bias in it and is weighted heavily into one area, well, then the likelihood is that your output is going to be also weighted and biased in that area. So those are key concepts that every time we're using I try to keep in the back of my mind because I want to be able to think objectively and say
Right.
this data seems a little biased. Let me push back or, no, this sounds about right.
Yeah, thank you for getting into the nitty-gritty of it. I think this is the first time actually on the show that we're talking about temperature and weights, and we've spoken about AI a bunch of times. So thank you for getting into the nuts and bolts of it. What I would add on top is, you know, because you mentioned this lower temperature, right? And I think this is one of the challenges that we also had building out Talkie, where, oh, okay, you want it to be flexible or do you want it to be predictable, right? Definitely no creativity in terms of coming up with scheduling slots that aren't there, right? So how do you actually get both? And what we landed on, this isn't a trade secret. A lot of similar companies are doing that. Is of course sub agents, right? So in order to have the best of both worlds, you split, depending on what kind of scenario an initial agent recognizes, you split it into sub scenarios. So, oh, okay, this is a scheduling conversation. This is a conversation about getting information about the appointment. And then there's a separate kind of body of training or like instructions for just this particular type of scenario so that it doesn't get, mixed up. If this is a scheduling conversation, then you should get an appointment slot from the patient. You should get their preferences in terms of the when they want it and with which doctor, et cetera, right? So this is how you can get kind of both. There's flexibility, But at the same time, because the instructions are just for this one particular type of conversation that gets recognized at the beginning, you can have predictability of, okay, if the patient wants scheduling, you're not going to suddenly start talking with them about like cheesecake recipes, right? These guardrails are super important because unfortunately people do speak differently with AI than they speak with humans. They try to, try to kind of uh, get this unpredicted behavior out of them. But companies like ours building out the AI, we're ready for that, and we have these guardrails in place. Just wanted to add on top of that. I wonder if subagents is maybe something you can get into also in a little bit more detail because I'm just explaining from my point of view. Is that something you cover in your course as well?
So my 101 course doesn't cover agents. That's coming in
Right.
my 201 course that is
Okay.
being developed now. So yeah, I mean the whole agent space has really exploded this year,
Mhm.
and we know that they work better when they're given defined tasks, and you have this coordinator agent that's
Mhm.
being able to deploy them. So yeah, that's yet to come, but it's and here's the challenge, Jakob, is that this information, this space is moving so fast, and it sounds so
True.
cliche to say that, but it truly is. 6 months ago, when I created that first course, agents were an idea, and they really weren't well deployed throughout. In the last 6 months, we're seeing agents all over the place, and agents are being put into, anybody's hands that wants to pay for a subscription these days. So, it's really, really interesting, and, it is sometimes a little challenging to keep up, but that's what excites me, about it, right? We're getting closer and closer to making processes better and hopefully delivering, again, for what our patients need and want.
Absolutely agreed on the pace of that this space is moving at. And I've worked at a few companies at this point in a few different contexts, but I was blown away when we were sharing, quarter by quarter these product updates and adding. I mean, from a marketing perspective, we can barely keep up with the with the new things that Talkie can do. And we're just one example here, of course. I mean, I love to promote Talkie on Talkie's show, but this is it's just an example, just one data point, and the whole industry is moving at this pace. It definitely makes it the opposite of boring. Very, very interesting to be in this space. I'm sure you'll agree. So, with that in mind, let me ask you about something else. Working, teams like ours working with people like you. So software teams working with clinicians is what I wanted to ask about next because you mentioned in our previous conversation actually that the frontline clinicians are kind of innovators. I wonder how you would describe a good collaboration between a team building this software in this quite sensitive context, right, of healthcare, working with clinicians who have the subject matter expertise. What advice would you have to both sides really on how to make that collaboration fruitful and lead to good, useful, actually useful AI products?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think about this a lot. And,
Mm,
I think what we have to do is recognize our collective subject matter expertise, right?
okay.
Nurses, clinicians, front desk staff, they know their domain, they know what they need to do. They're not necessarily coders. Software engineers and coders are brilliant at what they do. They don't necessarily know like the workflow of a healthcare practice. So I think when you walk into a meeting with that clear understanding, that's where the collaboration needs to take place. And that's where we need to say, what are the challenge points? What are the areas that are giving a lot of, friction within the practice? And that's where the brainstorming, that's where the collective collaboration starts to happen. And I sadly think that it doesn't happen that way enough. I
Mhm.
think there could be some companies out there that say this is the solution and we've done a lot of research on it, but have you asked the people and have you included the people that are doing those very workflows every day, and do they have a say in it? So I think that's critically important for both sides to think about as we go. And I don't know if there's enough opportunities for clinicians to get involved. That's a question that a lot of people ask me, right? Like they'll say, "I love AI. I want to be cutting edge, but how do I speak to companies who want my input? And I'm trying to create my own networks of connections. But right now, I think it's hard to make those actual connections.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. I do agree that there needs to be more of a conversation here. I think, some of the software teams, they're just so excited about building that they don't take, put aside the time for this reality check. With marketing, it can be similar. You're excited about a piece of content and you never
Exactly.
actually ask yourself, are people going to read this, right? Is this something that actually addresses their day-to-day concerns? Or even like, is it too long, and a busy
Right.
clinician, for example, won't consume this piece of content. But going back to the topic at hand, so what do you think? I'm imagining we're in the room and that such a conversation is happening. One of the software teams actually got a clinician on board to look at their product. What is something that they're most likely to hear that is most likely to surprise them?
I would say the simplicity of seemingly the solution of the problem that exists. I think once we're in those rooms together and a clinician or a staff member says, this is our problem that we have. And a software engineer could say, I could solve that in 5 minutes with
Hmm.
code. I think that, not everything is simple. There's a lot more, complication behind the scenes, but I think that's where the marrying of the two and the effect could be so impactful. We don't need to, collectively recreate the wheel here. There are solutions to everyday problems that exist that will make lives easier. And why do we want to make lives easier? Because we want to reduce stress and burnout in staff and clinicians, and we want to
Right.
be able to spend that time with the patients that we're bringing in our doors. So that's for me again, that's what motivates me, that's what drives me. If you tell me you have a solution that's going to make me a better clinician, that's going to get patients in my door, and once they're there, they're gonna feel like they're the only patient that this practice sees. Sign me up. Tell me how I could tap into that.
One thing that comes to mind here is I think the simplicity of not just the product, but the interface gets overlooked, because somebody could build, I'll be speaking on the example of Talkie, right? Using Talkie as an example. So, you might think, okay, we built this AI receptionist. It'll pick up calls for you. It'll, interface with your phone system. All you have to do is there's this box here, this text box, and you need to type out all the rules of your practice in terms of scheduling. So which
Mhm,
doctor takes which patients, if they're not seeing patients on Tuesday, we'll take some of that from from what you have hard coded in your like Athena one or whichever EHR, right? But other
mhm,
than that, you need to type that all in. And I think that could actually creates a lot of friction in the interface. That's okay. So I don't have time. I barely have time to pick up all the calls and see all the patients. Now I need to also do all of this configuration, which is why, our team, we rather work, it's almost part of like this the service within the product of okay, tell us what this is like for you. Some of it is like an intake form, of course, but what I mean is, make that step of the process simpler, make the setup simpler, make adjusting the agent simpler, and I think adoption is going to be that much higher. Second thing is getting the users, well, the end users here being the patients, used to interfacing with the product. So we share, email templates, PDFs, posters you can hang in your practice.
mhm.
Because if there's more adoption, if there's more friction on that end as well, then the effects are much better. And this is something that we learned actually talking with a lot of practices and actually seeing this play out. And I think that's would be, if I were to get that question, that would be part of my answer is, look at not just the simplicity of the product, but also the interface, the setup, and reducing some of that friction. I wonder if that tracks with your experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we also have to be very open to, and this gets back to the change management piece that I was saying, is just because you're doing something the way you've been doing it from day one doesn't mean that that's the best way to do it. So we on the practice side have to sometimes give up a little bit of that control and say, maybe this isn't the best way to do something.
Yeah.
And on the software developer side, I want technology that works around me, not that I'm working around. Because and you mentioned that, right? Like we have to train the software. We have to do more stuff to do what it is we are already doing, right? And now this becomes another task, right? That I have to do out of my busy workday. So I think that's where both sides, the software side and the clinical side, have to be open to saying, okay, just because we're doing things this particular way doesn't mean that's the way we have to do it going forward. And again, I think the technology is great when it works and it works
Right.
around us and not me becoming a person that has to repeat everything I'm doing for the AI
Yeah.
solution that the company is using.
I read a very catchy phrase about that, that AI should remove work and not just move work around. And that stuck with me. I think this is like the fourth time I'm mentioning it on this show alone. So that's a catchy one. Whoever came up with that, kudos,
Yeah.
kudos on that. Okay, so I would like to look to the future now with you a little bit. So there are these AI use cases that I think most of the listeners have heard about already. So we've got, of course, if you're listening to this show, you've heard about AI receptionists. Go to Talkie AI, book a demo, and let them know that the podcast sent you. There's AI scribes as well. For example, you mentioned using AI for marketing purposes, which is non-clinical, right? A lot of brands are using that now, affects their brand perception to some extent. Some brands can get away with it, others not so much. But if you're running just a small practice, then being able to add some simple graphics that you would never be able to afford to either create or buy. I think that's actually quite a great use case. I do wonder though, what do you think, as somebody who's deep in the space, is an AI use case that is not being talked about, that in a year or two, or heck, maybe even 6 months, is gonna get talked about a lot more? Like, what's on the horizon that people aren't even expecting right now?
Great question, Jakub. And what I think you mentioned the ambient scribes, are being used all throughout. What I am looking forward to is the computer vision that is coming. So not only do we have voice, but now we're going to have the ability to track video. Now that may send shivers up some people's spines when it comes to privacy, and of course there have to be guardrails when we're talking about the type of video being collected. But let's just imagine that there's computer vision in a reception office in the reception area of a healthcare practice. That computer vision could immediately sense that that patient needs to be triaged right now. There's something with them, that their heart rate's elevated, their blood pressure's elevated, that warrants us to not have them check in and do our regular routine, but they may need some more assistance and more urgently. I think that's really, really exciting. I think that's on the horizon. And, we're seeing this type of technology to help prevent falls in patient rooms. There's prediction models to see, if a patient is moving a certain way, they may be of a higher fall risk. So, right now we're still using AI predominantly. We're typing, we're texting, it's listening. We're getting audio cues back from it. I think video and vision is the next big thing, and we'll see what other solutions that brings to us.
That's awesome. That's really amazing that you mentioned that. It's really quite fresh after, so many conversations around, for example, AI scribes, right? That's really saturated right now. And you know what? There's a very cool company in this space, and I'm happy to name drop them. Shen AI. They're tracking health markers through a face scan using just a camera, right? Over 30 health markers. I've been following them for quite a while. I do hope they're going to come on the show at some point, maybe through this episode, because I would love to ask some questions about that. And that's using the technology that you mentioned, right? Because I think, because we mentioned weights, we mentioned temperature, we mentioned tokens, but we haven't mentioned modes yet, right? That's
Mhm.
something that also kind of opened my mind in terms of, because I was used to initially when I was using AI, and initially when ChatGPT first came out, it was text to text, right? You write text, you get text back. But then I don't know if everybody's aware of how much is being done, or what the possibilities are, where the input is voice and the output is voice, or the input is video and the output can be in a different mode, and it never goes through text. So I wonder if you could maybe expand on that a little bit as somebody who's like teaching the fundamentals here. So what am I talking about? I suppose would be the question. Could you simplify that for the audience?
Yeah, so, we fancy term we use is multimodal large language
Right.
model, and, the idea is you can upload a video or a photo, and I have a slide on this, and was important for me to keep that context because LLMs, large language models, and these generative AI models do not see images like you or I do, right? We see
Mhm.
a photo and we say, "Oh, that's a dog," or "That's a puppy," right? The large language model is breaking that down into pixels and is identifying it one pixel at a time. So, and I think that's important for us to understand as we, are going to see more models with different modes of output. It doesn't see, and this has been talked about a lot in radiology, right? So
Mhm.
AI can read a CAT scan, it can read an MRI, but you know what? Radiologist jobs are not being taken by AI because we find that there are some models that work well at detecting an early breast cancer. But
Mhm.
you can't give AI a scan and say, what's wrong with this patient? Because it doesn't do very well with that. So they're very good at detecting patterns, at detecting pixels that are very subtle, but we still need the human co-work or co-piloting with this to make sure that, again, if we're going to use it on a patient, if it's going to have some interaction, then again, we need to make sure that that human or that clinician is in the loop to determine, whether we should move in a certain direction or not. So I think that's exciting. Again, we are three-dimensional beings, and
Yeah.
largely AI we've known in two dimensions, right? Video or voice. And that gets the whole idea. And I'm not going to go into the craziness of like the world model, but the idea of the AI being trained on like the world and what it means to be standing on this corner, on this street, in this block, in this city. That's something entirely different. And that's something that the developers are working on, to bring it more lifelike. And it's exciting. I think it's really, really exciting to see. Scary. It's
Yeah.
scary. But it's also, I think, an opportunity again to improve and make us better.
Definitely. And what I'm definitely is definitely my favorite word today on this episode. Overusing it. I'm calling myself out. Oh gosh. But what I wanted to also say here is it's interesting how you put it in terms of, for example, looking at the cases of skin cancer or looking at scans. It's not that AI is useless for this. It is already useful. It just needs human judgment on top, and we can't just completely defer to AI. But I guess what's really blowing my mind here is that we are already at this point where it's a collaboration. I'm not going to call it a 50-50 collaboration. That might be too much, right? But already a significant part of that work can be at least AI assisted, right? And that's in 2026. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? The human in the loop probably always, right? But
I hope so.
it's yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, today, yes. I mean, because, at the end of the day, uh, I have a license to practice in the state of New York
Exactly.
as a family nurse practitioner. AI does not. And
Mhm.
there's debate, active debate, whether AI models should take a licensure exam. We know that they can take exams and do very well on them, but what does that
Yeah,
mean when you have a live human being in front of you that's not a multiple choice question, right? Like,
yeah.
I've often said in some presentations I've given, I have yet to see a patient and at the end of that visit get a four, option multiple choice answer to select from, right? That
Mm,
doesn't exist right now. So it's ingrained in us in our education. Once you get licensed, it's your license to lose. And you want to make sure that any clinical decision you're making is defensible. And you can say, yes, I played the scenario out in my mind. The evidence is sound, the logic is sound, and now I'm going to recommend this particular treatment to this particular patient for this particular reason. So, I think that's the key here. And who knows what this will be like a few years from now, but humans are the ones who are licensed. It's up to you to verify and, make sure that any recommendation is sound before applying to a patient.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important guardrails that we actually have, right? Is there's stakes for the doctors that might not be there when you're talking about an AI. I mean, there's a variety of different legal conflicts right now about to what extent AI companies are liable in those sorts of scenarios. But that's a topic for a whole different episode. We touched upon this, I believe, with Brandon Keeler in a recent episode. But anyway, so I got just a couple more questions before I let you go here today. One of them is about just the practical application of things. So, what do you think for a smaller practice, let's say, 2 to 3 providers, maybe up to 10, let's say.
Mhm.
Mm, what's something that they should practically do about AI? Maybe they weren't so interested previously. Maybe they listened to this episode and now they're thinking, okay, but where do I start? What can they realistically get done in a week, a month, or an afternoon that would increase their knowledge, help them understand where they can be applying AI or start applying AI? I mean, I'll put the first point on the list, right? I do
Mhm.
genuinely think signing up for a couple demos, and you can sign up for hours first, is useful. Even, just as education, right? See how the technology works, ask your questions. You can treat it as a free consultation. Genuinely, with technology such as this, it's useful to talk with an expert who lives this stuff day in and day out. So if that's number one, what's number two on the list?
I'm a hands-on type of person, and I would advocate for someone. Look, there's a lot of free models that are out there. See what you could do with them. Don't use any patient information. Don't upload any real records into some of the foundational models that are out there. But certain models work better for certain things, and I will not tell you to. If somebody were to say which commercial LLM should I try? I say try them all. Use different scenarios. Use scenarios from your personal life. I once, as an example, I took a photo of the front of my house. I said, which plantings would you recommend for this
Okay,
section of
cool.
my house? Right. And it gave me a list. Not only did it give me a list, but it told me where I could buy the plants and a price range. And amazing, right? Now, that may not be amazing for landscapers who charge for that, but this is you're ideating, you're coming up with ideas, you're getting some type of consultation, and I think that's good. It makes you more informed, that when you do decide to hire a landscaper to put in all the plantings, you can have that discussion, a more informed discussion with them. So use it in your personal life, use it in an example of your work life, that, again, a pain point that you have, see what it can solve. And again, try that same prompt in different models and see what output you like the best.
Yeah, if you check out what it can do in terms of the possibilities and also hit upon some of the limitations yourself, I think your understanding will
Absolutely.
grow that much more. And I think another part of it is just education, not by doing, but also by learning and by listening to people, following them. I was wondering, with this landscape of AI moving at such a pace, do you have any sources of information that you would recommend? Any particular, I don't know, people to follow or sources of information to actually stay abreast of all of this?
It's a full-time job
Mm,
to
yeah.
see what is happening in the space. I mean, one of the gurus of AI, Ethan Malik, is on LinkedIn. He has a newsletter. He is the AI one of the AI gurus that are out there. I follow him for not specific healthcare AI, but again, what's happening in the space, in the model space. There's lots of podcasts. There's one called the AI Daily Brief. I like
Hmm.
to listen to. Again, it gets way technical, not technical. It gets way in the weeds, but it's good for me to hear what's coming.
Yeah,
So, there's lots of resources out there. And then, your chat GPTs, your open AIs, your Anthropics, they have some one-on-one resources that are free as well, that you could, do on your own. There's a lot of resources out there. This is stuff that's not taught to us in schools, right? Like,
definitely.
this didn't exist when I was going to school. So it takes a lot for us to get up to speed on this, and knowing it's changing rapidly, it becomes just all that more challenging. But set a limit, like we're recommended to set a limit on our social media use, allocate a half hour a week to learning something new that the large language models do. It's going to make us more informed. It's going to make us better able to use it and know where it's right and where it's wrong to use.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I'll definitely check out the podcast you mentioned and the person you mentioned as well. I haven't heard of. Sorry, what was the name? Ethan.
Ethan Mollick, I believe it's
Okay.
Mollick.
Never would have guessed that spelling, which is why we'll put it in the show notes. As always, watchers and listeners, so you don't have to guess either. On my end, I mean, working at an AI company definitely helps in terms of being up to date on this space. But I've also learned a lot from. I mentioned it previously from Reddit. There are
Ooh,
some really really active subreddits about it, and an example from just yesterday. Um, ChatGPT dropped this new model called ChatGPT Live. There's a new voice model, and it had some really interesting nuances, like you can more fluently interrupt it, or it can seemingly think about multiple tasks at once. It was really, really impressive, and they
mm,
had like three elderly lady actors, running the demo, the video for that. So that was cute. And then, so I found about that from Reddit, and the
ooh,
comments on Reddit really deepened my understanding of what's happening there. At the
mm,
same time, Grok dropped a new model, and there were some comparison benchmarks there. And some of the comments, okay, I'm looking at the benchmark and I'm not sure what I'm looking at, but then the comments really illuminated it for me, where they said, okay, the results, for example, in software coding may not be as high as the other models, but look at the efficiency. Look how much less tokens it burns as it does that. So now I understand it's a model that maybe doesn't have such a high ceiling in terms of capability, but it's cheaper, right? And I learned all that from Reddit. Second thing I would recommend is there's a ton of good YouTube channels. This AI craze has this advantage to it, where the creators are competing, who's going to have the best explainer video, who's going to have the best analogies, the best ways to explain this to you, and you can watch that for free. YouTube is really a treasure in that sense. So I would recommend that as well. And the last thing we definitely need to put on the list, and that's as we close out this episode, is where can people find and follow you, Stephen, to learn more about AI from you? How about we drop that in the show notes? Where should people go?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm active on LinkedIn. I try to post regularly about, AI and healthcare. There's, my AI Nurse Academy website, that while it's called AI Nurse Academy, anyone could take the foundational course. It is $20. It's not free. But it helps to support the platform that I have to run. It's an on-demand course, right? So you could start it in one session, you could stop, you could come back to it. There's a post test for it. Comes with some resources. So check that out. I'm sure you'll have the link there, but it's ainurseacademy.ai is the website. I'm also on Instagram, and yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah. Do you have a newsletter yet, or is that still coming?
No, that's still I've got I've debated whether another newsletter would be useful in the so
Mhm.
many newsletters that are out there. So I haven't decided if I want that yet, but it's to be determined.
Okay, okay, yeah, absolutely. And I would say, to the $20 part of it, I would say, you can look up a lot of stuff for free online. But it's not every day that you get to learn from somebody who ran the AI office at Columbus School of Nursing, for example. You have this unique expertise, and I think for the price of what today is, I guess, a couple of coffees at most, it's a fair deal in my estimation. All right, and that's where we'll close off this episode. Chris, I'm sorry. I'm gonna start again.
Okay.
I was reading something from my notes. All right, and that's where we'll close off this episode. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on this episode. Do you have any last thoughts to share with our audience before I hit the stop recording button?
Jakob, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think that whenever we're talking about AI, it's not just about AI in healthcare. This is happening in the world around us, right? And
Definitely.
we as responsible citizens need to inform ourselves as to this technology. It's impacting, what's the environmental impact on this? There's a lot of talk on data centers these days. So, this is not a flash in the pan. This is not something that's not going to, there's talk about the AI bubble bursting. And even if it were to burst, what we have today is significant to what we had prior to it. So, we're going to be learning for years and years. And how do we best incorporate this? So, do a little work, spend a little time to understand it better. And I do think that that's going to make us more responsible people, more responsible, healthcare people as well, and ultimately use it for good. Because that's what I hope happens. We could use it for bad, and that would be bad. That would be the end of what we know, right? But there's so much good that can happen as a result of it. So that's what I want to see.
What a lovely note to end on. Yes, watchers and listeners, let's not create Skynet, and let's try and use AI for good. Let's try and do that. And to stay informed, I mean, one good idea might be to follow this show. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, follow us on the podcast platforms, and rate us as well. We need more ratings on Spotify and Apple for this to really blow up. Leave a comment, leave a like, message us, find us on LinkedIn if you like the show. We love to hear your feedback, so keep it flowing. And for today, this will be everything. Thank you once again, Stephen, for joining us here on the show, and thank you, watchers and listeners, so much for joining us here today. This has been Scaling Practice Management. I have been Jakub Grajcar, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye, everyone. Take care.